This episode of Ask the Masters is brought to you by Miracote. Master designer Dave Penton sits down with world-renowned tile expert Jimmy Reed of Rock Solid Tile out of Calabasas, California. Hold on tight, this is going to be a great show.
Hello and welcome to the Ask the Masters podcast. This podcast is dedicated to discussions about the design and construction of water shapes. The hosts of the show are all certified SWD masters who represent the leading builders and designers within the water shaping industry today. Welcome in to the Ask the Masters podcast, and we're on location today somewhere in Beverly Hills, and I am with the one and only Jimmy Reed.
Hey.
Can you, for the three people out there that don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and what's your company? And
There's at least three. I know of them. They're in my family.
Okay, perfect.
I'm Jimmy Reed from Rock Solid Tile, and we do all tile pools.
And you and I have been together. I was trying to think. The first job we did down in Orange County is probably, 8 or 9 years ago now?
I think so, yeah. Almost 10 years. So
your specialty is glass tile pools and all tile. You do a little bit other stuff.
Sure, yeah. Mostly in the pools that we're all involved in, the biggest desire is the glass. Yeah.
Sure.
So occasionally we'll do some stone mosaic or other, even art glass mosaic pieces, murals and things like that. Mostly though is all tile pools and mostly is glass.
Cool.
And glass is tricky, you know. It moves differently than porcelain or ceramic or stone. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, it's a lot harder. I mean, glass is an inert object, and nothing really wants to stick to it too well. So you can't use traditional setting methods and everything, and so you got to be a whole lot more careful.
Definitely, yeah.
So we'll get into that a little bit more later, but I want to know who is Jimmy Reed and how did you get involved in this? I know you got some cool stories about touring in Europe and your grandfather and all of that. So bring us back to.
Well, okay. Basically, I grew up in California, in Los Angeles, in Studio City, which is in San Fernando Valley. That's where we all grew up. I'm one of 6 kids. One of my brothers, Mike, he's the next brother down. He's also a tile contractor.
Cool.
He does mostly interiors. Most of our family is somehow artistically involved in something. I started working in the tile and stone business when I was about 12 years old. We had this guy that lived across the street from us, this hippie musician, kind of stoner, big white dude that had a bunch of burly, friends, and they all were stone guys. So I started working for them in the summers and on weekends and things when the surf was down.
And that was back.
That was in early 70s. Yeah,
okay.
Mid-early 70s. Probably around 73 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Back in the Dogtown era.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if I wasn't skating or surfing, I was looking for a couple of bucks to fund my skating and surfing.
Exactly, to pay for gas.
Yeah, so I'd work for these guys on the weekends and throughout the summers if I could. Just started at the bottom, doing the grunt work, mixing mud, hauling tools and bags upstairs and in these big old houses that they were working on.
Now, did you find your passion at that point? Is that where you kind of thought you were going to stick? Was it just a job? I mean, how did you transition out of that? And because I know you had a bit of a break and went and did something else for a little while and then came back.
I've done a lot of things. I've always kind of kept my hands into tile and really construction in a way because it was always a source of some type of income no matter what else was going on. And being a musician and a young starting out musician at the time, there was zero money in that, and it was more for the hobby of it and just because I love being in the music world, in the local scene, and playing music and being in bands and just basically having fun, partying a lot, and but those are different days. But I always did keep some kind of connection to building, and I even built sets for a company,
cool.
A magazine, and at the same time as doing a lot of other stuff like an occasional bathroom. Occasional deck or something like that.
So at everything you've done, you've always had a bit of an artistic outlet in all of the work. It's what it sounds like.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I look back on it, and definitely that's how it played out for sure. So you asked how I stayed in it, or if I thought that was going to be my artistic drive. I didn't really think it at the time, but I was super like when I was doing helping the guys out when I first started out. I certainly wasn't doing any installing or anything artistic or cool, but I was watching these guys do these really, because we were doing a lot of big like Mediterranean or Spanish style homes at the time. So all the tile was really cool, a bunch of different trim pieces and a lot of different designs and things. And watching these guys that I was helping install this stuff and kind of lay it out and really start showing me that there's, unintentionally just showing me that there was a real method to the madness. I mean, there's a process and a mathematical kind of a layout. So, so that really intrigued me. The layout portion of it, but also what was possible to do and what was available, the tile material that was available, on these cool interiors we were doing.
Yeah, and back,
or they were doing
with that style, it's very much, you got quarter rounds and you got beaks and you really, you had to learn that it's not just laying a number of tiles down. You have to think about your floats and where you're setting everything and how all of the other puzzle pieces are going to fit together. You may have 4 or 5 different pieces.
And it was only floating then. I mean, there was no such thing as, hardy back or backerboard of any kind then, so I learned and watched these guys float everything, And again, it was at the time, it was only interiors.
Sure.
I didn't do my first pool till probably mid 80s, I guess.
Okay.
Mid 80s or maybe a little late 80s, I'd say.
Yeah. So when did the artistry, when were you able to kind of start to, take the artistry that you're so known for and you're detailing in here? When did that start to come back in pools? It sounds like you moved away from that in the 80s because there just wasn't that much artistry. Tell me how you kind of retransitioned, or did you drive that to kind of bring that back in, your artistic desire?
I think maybe inadvertently I did. It wasn't a conscious decision to do that. Or even to get here where we are today. It just kind of was something that naturally unfolded and morphed into what we're dealing with and what we're able to provide, and really what we're interested in. It just kind of evolved. I mean, getting to work with and develop relationships with landscape designers and pool designers, waterscape designers, that really helps. It's different than just getting a job and showing up materials there and just go install it. So although that does happen sometimes,
sure.
But depending on when we are brought into the project, it's the more involvement that I have in it, of course, the more I enjoy it, and I think the better it turns out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what the process is. So I know we've been working on this pool together for a couple years now, and
people, you say a couple years now, a lot of people would say, how can you be working on this one pool for a couple of years? There's a lot that goes into it, a lot of relationship development and a lot of planning and strategic investment from years. Like you say, it could be years gone by before we actually set foot on the project.
Yeah, and this project in particular is a major remodel of the house. I mean, they doubled the square footage of the house, and so, we were involved very, very early on, even before they started the demo on the house. And you were brought in pretty quickly. And so walk through the process, because you can't just go to Oceanside Glass Tile and find this material. This is how did you guys come to this? And that's one of my favorite parts of your stories, is how you work with the clients and create one-off artistic creations for them.
Well, this job in particular, we were brought in by the job site superintendent, who I am friends with, John Clark. He has worked for a few companies that we've been involved with over the years and done projects for, and by nature, those type of people kind of travel around and work for different companies. Anyway, he called us in at some point, and he had a real good relationship, and still does a really good relationship with a client. This is an existing pool. Obviously, the shape isn't something that we see ever really being built now, but it's a fairly deep, free-form, kind of the old traditional 70s, 80s free-form type pool. They weren't quite interested in removing the pool, so although we did push, we tried.
Yeah.
She just wanted something subtle, but kind of a definite upgrade to what was here. What was in this pool before was an old porcelain,
Poorly done too. The cuts
poorly
were bad,
done, sure.
and
But also it was just kind of dead looking, whether it was installed nicely or not. The material was dead. I mean, it wasn't what it could be easily.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to, or in the position to step up a little bit on this. I mean, this isn't an elaborate pool by any means. Little bit of money for the tile and the tile work, but I think it's well worth it. So when she brought us in, when John brought us in, we met with a client. We went through a series of meetings and discussions about her goals. She, like I said, she wanted something fairly mild but nice, really nice. So we just came up with a bunch of blends. She wanted to stick with blues, which is nice. It works here. And it was just a series of meetings and ideas.
And that's not a 2 or 3 day process. I mean, I remember seeing
No.
those emails. I mean, that was 6, 7, 8 weeks of just back and forth with Oceanside, doing blends.
Right. This happens to be an Oceanside glass tile project that we used here. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of contact with the manufacturer, which is a good thing. I mean, I've been in this business for quite a while, so I know a lot of the people directly at the manufacturers. Sometimes we'll buy through showrooms, just depending on the position of the showroom, position of the manufacturer at that time. But either way, we have direct connections to the manufacturers. Mostly it's Piazza or Oceanside, or occasionally Seacheese or Light Streams, even something like that. But if I need something like these, I mean, this finally, what you see here is probably, we probably made 10 or 12 mock-ups before we settled on this exact combination. So it's a lot of back and forth with the client, with Oceanside, the manufacturer of this, and just creating. And the benefit, something I really like about Oceanside and some of the other manufacturers is I can call them or email them and get a sample in the mail the next day, overnight. So within 2 days, I can have a sheet here. But what we do normally is we'll take a sheet and then we'll mount it and grout it and put a lead line on it so we can actually drop it in a pool. So so the client can see what it actually looks like in the water.
Yeah, because it's so different,
than just holding it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice when we have a remodel or something like this to be able to have the water still in there. And we've even taken clients out to jobs and where there is water in there, just so that they can see the material underwater.
Yes.
And that, because it reads so much differently than it does just laying around on the kitchen countertop.
Yeah, a lot different.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about like a pool like this is that you're not gonna, the neighbors are not gonna come over and go, oh yeah, that's blend X. It's no, this is Elizabeth's blend. I custom made this, and it allows the clients to really have a sense of pride and ownership, and it allows them to go, yeah, this is mine. This is only mine. Nobody else has this, and that always helps with the clients too. They feel really proud of what we've been able to deliver for them.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'll do a blend and the client will be adamant that nobody else can use it. So we'll have an agreement that it's proprietary to that particular client.
Yeah, we got Kona and one client, a number of pools that they have a one-off blend that nobody else can touch. Yeah. So, do you tell me about your first all-tile pool? I mean, did it just kind of happen out of the blue? Did you push on it?
Did
you?
No, I worked for a contractor, and I had done some interiors with glass. That was actually the first glass projects that I did were for this particular client. I remember the owner, not the contractor that I worked for, but the owner of that job, coincidentally, was a music executive that I was very familiar with at the time.
Okay.
Anyway, we did a couple of bathrooms with some glass mosaic material. Beautiful feature walls. There's more of a mid-century home that was in, I think, was in Malibu, and back in the canyons. And that contractor had me do after a couple of jobs that I started working with him, had me do a pool, all tile pool, and it just really started from there. And it was the first all tile pool was a glass pool.
Are you still proud of it, or is it one of the, like the first pool I ever built? I look back and I think,
well,
yeah,
that pool's
it was
gone
okay.
now.
And, okay,
Unfortunately, it's gone away.
okay,
But I'm proud of it. I mean, of course, looking at the picture of it now, I look and I see I would not do that now.
right, exactly.
But I mean, that was our first run at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, even now, I mean, I can look at a pool I did a year ago and think or know that I would do something a little bit differently now.
Yeah.
We have a project coming up that my guys are actually floating right now that I have some ideas about some new transition details. So it's always, my head's always kind of moving. The little man on the bike up here is always
Yeah, those
alive.
3 a.m. inspirations that you
Oh, my
wake up
God.
and you got to get up and write it down. Yeah, I have those too. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah. So that's primarily what you do now. All tile pools. I know,
Yeah.
you and I, you've done all my all tile pools that we've done for the last how many years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you'll still do, smaller waterline, all tile spa and that.
Sure.
So it's not, you're not exclusive to that.
Two all tile pools?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
No,
definitely your
it-
preference.
Yeah, if somebody called, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for somebody to call me for a 6-inch water line,
Sure.
porcelain water line, because I'm just not set up to do a project like that efficiently and financially efficiently for either of us, for the client or myself.
Sure.
So, and the enthusiasm is there. I want to be really excited about, and I am super excited about all the jobs we work on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but sometimes if a client directly, like a homeowner calls me direct, they really don't know what the options are. They may hear of us, they get recommended from a tile showroom or something without really knowing just what is available. So sometimes they'll call for just a water line. I'll talk to them a little bit on the phone, and I answer the phone all the time, and I have all kinds of people that call you wouldn't believe some of the questions I get asked. But a lot of the clients that do call, they don't know. They're just thinking about a new water line in their pool, and so on that in that situation, normally I know that the budget isn't there for an all tile pool.
Sure.
So, but let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can really let them expose them to different ideas, like maybe a face on the spa, or even on the entire spa. Let's do the entire spa, or maybe the entry on the existing pool.
Sure.
So you can really kind of dress up the pool easily without having to, commit to all tile.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit too about the kind of the teamwork aspect. You and I work together all the time. You bring me into jobs, I bring you into jobs. Sometimes the homeowner has brought you in, and then we come in as a backup part of the team. We have a landscape architect, Allison, that we do a lot of work with together. She gets brought into projects. So, how do you engage projects? I mean, it's pretty diverse.
How do I engage? Well, I would say most of our work is referral, right? And so if I get called by let's say a homeowner that wants to do something, for instance, we have a project, you and I have a project in the Palisades that I was called originally by the homeowner, and they had an existing old traditional rectangle pool in their backyard basically over a cliff, over a canyon. And they kind of wanted, beautiful, beautiful house in a very exclusive neighborhood. In the backyard, they had this basically a crappy old pool.
Boring
Old pool.
Colors
So
were
what I'm talking
wrong,
about.
and
Everything
it
was
was just,
wrong.
yeah.
The question was, can I tile this pool? And I'm looking around and go, yeah, we can do that. Are you available? Yeah, we're available, but let's step back a minute. What is your real goal here? Because I knew just by the neighborhood and the property and what was going on in the end, just walking into the house, you knew it was a high-end.
And what they
Could be
had
a high-end
already
project.
done too. I mean, the house was stunning.
House is beautiful. And so I suggested that we get a team in. What I called was our team of landscape design, a proper pool builder, and let's see if we can really make this spectacular. You guys open to that? And I was talking, and the wife was just like, oh my God, yeah, no, we never even thought of that. So I called you, I called Allison Terry, landscape designer, and a landscape architect, and they made a connection, meaning Allison and the homeowners, and then you made a connection, and we all kind of came together and started this beautiful project that turned into something much bigger than any of us thought.
Hi, I'm Grant Smith with Aqualink Pools and Spas. Welcome to Ask the Masters podcast. We have Trevor Foster from Miracote here. Trevor, it's great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. It's awesome to have you. I use your product all the time, so I buy quite a lot of it. I use it. Can you tell everybody else about your product and what it's used for?
Yes, sir. So with Miracote, we have multiple products for pools. Depends on if it's in the ground, if it's raised, if it's cantilevered, if it's above structure. The biggest thing with Miracote products, what we really try and promote is a systems approach. And the systems approach starts at the shell and works its way all the way through a bond coat to ensure that we get bonding capabilities and whatnot. So, our first step is using a colloidal silicate. That is, placed on the shotcrete as soon as it can be walked on, reacts with the calcium hydrate, pretty much eliminates the efflorescence. It strengthens the shell somewhat, but it's not really a densifier at that point like we would use in the polished concrete industry. So that's where we start to get to the root so we don't have efflorescence, which can cause chemical attack, which can cause bonding failures. After that, we obviously have the membrane C, which you use a lot of too, Grant. And the membrane C is an anti-fracture membrane. We put that on the shell if we're not doing tile, but it's just going to be a typical cementitious or aggregate finish. Or we'll go over a bonded mortar bed if in fact it's going to be glass tile, porcelain, ceramic, anything like that. And then kind of the last big product in our pool line would be the BC Pro, which is our bond coat or adhesion promoter for an aggregate or cementitious finish to stick to the membrane C.
Right. Isn't your BC Pro also used for waterproofing and like on houses for like decks?
Negative side.
Negative
side waterproofing.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But we don't want to solely rely on that because
correct,
it is vapor permeable and it does. A bond coat will always be a rigid material.
Right.
So we can't have something that's rigid and flexible all in one. You either have to be a membrane or you have to be a bond coat. You can't be both.
Right. Okay.
Physical properties of cement just won't allow you to.
Right. So the great thing about your product is it is a cementitious product. So you don't have to, if you just want to do a waterline tile or you just want to do like a negative and positive side of a weir wall, you can just do that with your product.
Yes,
is
sir.
that correct?
Yes, sir. That is absolutely correct. And that's the beauty of it. You can do partial areas. You don't have to do from bond beam to trough. You can do a tile line, you can do a raised spa, you can do a rear wall, you can do the infinity edge all alone, because as water molecule is much bigger than a vapor molecule. So that's the way whenever you mix a rubber polymer and sand and cement, you actually get a pathway for moisture vapor to get out without causing blistering, bubbling, or delamination.
Great. I think that's a great application because not all pools, especially just the average pool that sits in the ground, it can use it under the water line and like you said, a raised bomb beam or raised spa, but it may not need to have the entire, vessel waterproof.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And, unfortunately or unfortunately, however we want to look at it, we are here in Southern California where we don't have land to build on acres. So we have to put pools above structure.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where, we really started this whole thing 10, 12 years ago to where, I go to Arizona or I go to Vegas or I go to Texas or Colorado or Washington or Hawaii, they have land to build on. So when I show them pictures of what we're doing here, it doesn't resonate. They think, oh, well, we don't have the money to do the whole pool. And you're exactly right. So we can just do partial areas, which is 90% of the country.
Right, exactly. So it's the most flexible, I think, out there. So kind of get into about the flexibility of your product.
So flexibility of our product, Membrane C, is due to the blend of aggregates and cement and the polymer that we use. And as you all know, there's many, many different types of polymer. I mean, just to name a few, there's acrylics, there's EVAs, there's SBRs, there's PVAs, and the acrylic that's used really regulates or values the flexibility of a material. And, the ones that we use, not to go into proprietary information, is we do get 72% elongation. For a cementitious material, that's outstanding.
Right.
And, again, we would love to be a one-step process, but we can't be rigid and hard for a bond coat, but you can't be flexible at the same time.
Right.
So that's why we have to do that double step.
Right.
But I mean, flexibility, that's the performance of when you're doing glass tile and honoring that P602 spec from the Tile Council of North America. We want a flexible membrane over that bonded mortar bed to kind of shade out or take away that movement from underneath, so we don't see it through the thin set, the grout, or possibly the tile.
Okay.
And the flexibility is kind of what sets us apart from pretty much every one of our competitors out there.
Great.
Is we don't promote it as both, we promote it strictly as an anti-fracture membrane.
Right. Excellent. I know you have different colors with the membrane C. Why is that?
The different colors is twofold. So originally we just had white and natural. And what we were promoting with the white and the natural was, because our system is a 2-coat application, we do 30 mils for each coat of membrane C. The first coat would be the natural, the second coat would be the white, or vice versa. So, people could see if there was a couple holidays, if they were too thin, they weren't getting the coverage. But what we tended to find out was in the aquascape arena, be it fountains, ponds, koi ponds, water features in front of property management or apartment complexes, was membrane C being vapor permeable. We have a fountain that's in the ground that has been turned off for a couple of years. We can allow our contractors to pigment the white pigment with one of our liquid pigments, or excuse me, the white powder with one of our liquid pigments, create a brown, a blue, a black, a beige, and actually coat that pond as a usable surface that's pigmented that then can be a standalone.
Right.
And so that's when we started looking at our existing line of liquid pigments and saying, hey, we can add it into a white powder in our polymer just like we do with our concrete restoration products.
Right.
And we were able to kind of expand from just being in the pool to going into aquascapes. But then with that, not knowing pools, I started talking to pool builders about troughs, and troughs are hard to tile, troughs are hard to plaster, and sometimes they're on the edge of a cliff, like you just said, they're hanging over the cliff, nobody ever sees them. So they were able to make the membrane C virtually black, and just go ahead and put it in there and not have to finish it with anything and let it be exposed in the trough.
Yeah, absolutely. Like anytime I have a gutter system or I have like a trough where I'm covering with like black Mexican pebble, we just use the membrane C, the natural, and it turns out great because it's dark enough to where it doesn't pick up on the eye. Looking down a little slit, or if you happen to notice through like a pebble that's misplaced or something.
100%, absolutely.
And then we don't have to do anything else with it, and that's what makes the system so great.
That's correct.
So,
and the same, and the furthermore on that, our BC Pro can be pigmented as well. It comes in white. But I know when the guys are doing black plaster or black pebble, really worries them that because our BC Pro is heavily textured to make sure we get mechanical adhesion with the plaster, some guys kind of worry about when they're walking around in spikes is breaking off little tips of our BC Pro and actually getting that mixed in. So we allow them to field pigment that if they want a blue or a black or a red, depending on what the cementitious or aggregate finish is as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, Trevor, it's great to have you here. I mean, this was just a wealth of information. It's almost like an infomercial. So, so that's great, and we appreciate it. I believe in your product, and I think waterproofing really is taken off in the industry, and I think it's a long time coming. So
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
What keeps you going these days? I mean, you've done
kids.
so much. And
My kids and my wife.
yeah.
I think the next job, business-wise, the next job always keeps me going.
Yeah.
Once to me, like you were saying in the beginning, the part of the fun aspect of getting these jobs is going through the picking and choosing and creating stages of it in the beginning, and I really like that a lot. Yeah. So.
Well, and it doesn't end once the tile material is chosen. I mean, that's the one thing that people may not know about you is you're out here and on that big Baja shelf. I think you did that corner 6 times, and it wasn't because it was a mistake. It was every time it looked good, but you kept taking it out and making it a little bit better and a little bit better. And I don't even want to know what that corner cost you, but at the end of the day,
that was a gift to the client.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
Yeah.
Nice gift.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that isn't. Typically, I will bid a job and give a price to do that job. So a lot of times it may be considered high, but I mean, I think that we give a really good product to our clients. So I'm not ashamed of our pricing.
Sure.
And a lot of times people ask, well, what's your square foot price? There is no square foot price. I don't know what the details are until I see it and really wrap my head around it. But back to that corner, that is not something that you can look at a set of plans and know exactly how it's going to play out.
Sure.
So, I did it. I had my guys do it, and I helped with them, and they helped me kind of figure out how many rows we needed, and how the radius would be, and it just took a while. It took a while to get there. So you don't know that kind of stuff looking at a set of plans.
Right. Let's talk. Let's get a little bit technical because I know a lot of our listeners are really interested in that.
Sure.
Mesh back tile.
Hate it.
So this is not a mesh back tile.
Imagine that. Yeah. Mesh back. You want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Usually mesh back tiles are from areas that just typically don't have a lot of quality control, and it's hard also to get information from these, some of these factories that are overseas that you don't have a lot of relationship with or familiarity with. So you don't know what the glue is that they may have been using on the mesh. You don't know what the mesh actually is, and you need to know how much coverage is on the back and how much access to the back of the pieces you have with the mesh being on there. It just doesn't make sense to bond to some unknown material as opposed to getting 100% coverage of whatever material you're using to install onto the back of that piece of tile.
Yeah, and
Each piece of tile.
per TCNA, Tile Council in North America, you have to have 95% coverage.
And I say, why stop there?
Yeah, exactly.
100% is what we strive for. So
And that's
with
just
anything
impossible.
on the back, it's impossible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even if it's fishing line thin. What people don't, they look at that and think, oh well, this one's probably okay. Nobody realizes that has to be adhered somehow, and usually it's all glued, and the glue covers the entire back of the tile, and really you might be getting 15% of actual connection between your setting bed and the tile, and long term, that's going to start to delaminate.
Yeah.
When a client's spending, into the six figures for an all tile pool, that just doesn't make any
$5.
sense.
If it's not right, it's not right.
Well,
it just doesn't make sense to use inferior material
Sure.
at any cost, or any savings, because it's not a savings.
There's a lot of film faced tile and paper faced, and I know paper faced really scares people away quite a bit. Everybody wants to do more film faced, so we get a sample here. So this is paper faced tile.
Yes, it is.
So this is actually not the back of the tile. For people unfamiliar with this. So how do you even? Why do you do this? Why do you choose this over plastic faced?
Believe it or not, this gives you the most flexibility and access to adjusting and manipulating each tile than anything else, even than plastic. So this will, for people that aren't familiar with how Mosaic installs, basically this sheet will get installed onto the thin set bed on a wall or on a floor, and it'll be tamped in, so like I said before, we try to get 100% coverage, meaning if you peel this back once it's installed, there's no glass showing, you see nothing but the thin set. So you want as much coverage as possible. But then once you have a section of this type of material installed, you go back and hydrate the paper a bit with a sponge, just a wet sponge basically, wipe it down, and it'll take a couple of times depending on the weather and the atmosphere for the water to penetrate and emulsify the glue.
Yep.
Yeah, get into the glue that's holding. And this glue is designed specifically for this, so it cleans off very easily and hydrates quickly, so you can peel the paper off. But once that paper is peeled off, then you have, in this one sheet of tile, you have 178 pieces of glass.
Wow.
That's a lot of pieces to manipulate. So a lot of times people go, oh yeah, Mosaic, but you got it in 12 by 12 sheets though. Yes, but there's 178 pieces of tile that we have to deal with in that sheet, because that paper comes off, and then you got
and you're not
a colony of tiles.
You're not taking this paper off the next day either.
No, you have to do it while the
paper.
paper. Yeah, you have to do it while the thin set is wet and not so set up that you can't move them. The whole point is to remove the paper and adjust the pieces, so you don't see grids of sheet marks. And so some of the tiles, they're not always perfect. I mean, sometimes you have to move some around, and depending on the surface or whatever you're dealing with, there's a lot of manipulation that is involved in installing this type of material. I'm not trying to scare anyone away, because it's doable and it's learnable. You can learn how to do this and learn not to be afraid of this paper.
But it's also the reason why, say, a 6x6 porcelain tile, where you're just sticking it up there, you're manipulating, one tile.
One piece of tile.
As opposed to this, you're not just throwing 12 by 12 sheets up there.
No.
You're putting it up, and each one of those sheets, you're going through and double checking
touching,
all the.
actually touching every single piece of glass mosaic on this sheet.
Yeah.
So how many hundreds of thousands of pieces, maybe millions in this pool.
Mm-hmm.
Every one has been touched by a human hand and manipulated and adjusted.
Yeah, and hence the added expense. You know, it's very
It's time
labor
consuming.
intensive. You know, this pool is not terribly big by what we normally work on, but you know, how many weeks or even months do you have in here?
We were installing, we probably have close to 3 months install time on this, and that's from shell out. So we typically get a pool, whether it's new from you or another contractor or a remodel like this, that is just the concrete shell.
Mhm.
You know, we don't depend or even want anybody touching it once the shotcrete or gunite is done. We take it from that point out. So we'll do an initial waterproofing. Usually we like to treat it with Acuron CPSP.
Mhm.
That's a great concrete curing, penetrating sealer.
I know you and I on our jobs have been really exploring epoxy setting beds
Mhm.
and epoxy grouts and you know, the one job I referenced earlier, and it's a 90-foot long, 11 feet tall. It's actually a black basalt, not a granite, but a jet black material, infinity edge that had water trickling down over the face of it, and you know, those are deadly. You know, how many of those failures have you seen over the years?
I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
That one hopefully doesn't turn out to be deadly. I think we're doing pretty good on that one. That's probably almost a year old that we actually completed that.
Mm-hmm.
But smartly, the contractor separately contracted a waterproofing contractor, and they did a cementitious waterproof membrane over the entire surface of the pool.
Well, because the pool is over living space, and so the
Yeah.
entire
Mhm.
so membrane C was what they used, and you know, I mean, the whole entire pool was done with that. Even though it's not an all tile pool, they had their waterproofing contractor that was working on the house, and he came in and waterproofed the entire pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was great. So my initial concern with that was that it was a cementitious material. We're using a black granite stone material, and it's sun facing. So
Yeah.
I'm worried.
And why
about
was that concern?
effervescence. Well, I'm worried about the effervescence because even though that's a waterproof membrane, it still has cementitious qualities that can react to water. Not that the waterproof is going to get penetrated or
Right.
even fail in any way or be a concern in any way, other than visually it could, some minerals could emerge from that.
Yeah.
Especially if we do a traditional installation of this black stone facing in water, facing the sun, with cementitious thinset and cementitious grouts. So
Well, because black material. I mean,
black material is notorious for moving and reacting
Yeah, this one in
to
particular.
water and heat.
Correct. Yeah, when you get any sort of efflorescence, you know, that's white, and it shows up even just the tiniest little bit. It's like a glowing acne marks all over the side of the pool, even
Yeah.
if they're very small. And the challenge on this one as well was that. The vanishing edge, we recommend that they always have it running to keep it cooled, but we know clients
And
you know,
hydrated. Yeah.
and hydrated, yeah. And so we've got this dark material, fairly large format, that's going to expand and contract with the sun. Just the heat of it, and that's exacerbated by it being black. You know, the darker the material, the more movement you're going to get into it.
And basically a live material, as opposed to like a porcelain.
Right.
So that black granite will react different. This piece installed here will react differently than this piece here in the water.
Yep. Yeah. And so you and I kind of reapproached the contractor on that and said, you know, here's some of our concerns, and that was one job where they sourced the materials. We had no say in it. We had no,
Right.
you know, the architect came to us with the material, and once we realized what it was and the application, you know, we kind of pushed back and said, okay, you know, we want to do things a little bit differently, and so we did that with all epoxy.
We did.
And so,
Well,
why would we choose that?
I'll tell you what. Back to the membrane itself being cementitious, I was a little bit concerned about the reaction to water. So I suggested that we skim the entire surface with epoxy, and we tinted the epoxy also so that the epoxy would be black, and I'll tell you why. We wanted to skim coat and protect that waterproofing. It sounds funny, but we actually wanted to protect the waterproofing membrane from the effects of the water. So we skim coated it and then installed the black granite with the same black tinted epoxy, and we did a fairly small grout joint. I think we did a 16th inch grout joint, but we left it open. We did not grout it with anything, so there's no epoxy grout or no cementitious grout. So the reason we did black is so as you're walking by the wall, if you happen to see into those joints, at least it was black. You wouldn't see that there's a white or beige or some type of colored epoxy back there.
Sure.
Much like you would if it was thin set, they would ooze out the joints. So it looked totally black, but by leaving the joints open, we number one, from the epoxy, we have a solid bond of that piece of stone that's, I think it was 6 inch by 12
6
inch
by 12,
stone.
yeah.
So that piece of stone is bonded but not connected to anything else. So it's got a 16th inch all the way around it for movement. So
in the middle of the summer,
theory
that
was
can grow,
yeah.
and you're not going to get spalling. And like you know,
None
I want to
whatsoever.
reiterate that we did not grout that joint. That
Right.
grout joint is open, and you can't really tell until you walk right up to it and you look. And even at that point, when you look in between the pieces of stone with the tinted epoxy back there, you don't notice it at all. It doesn't draw your attention there.
it actually looks kind of cool now that I see it with the water overflowing it. It just the reaction or the movement of the water on the face of the stone. The stone is rough cut
Sure.
face also, so there's a lot going on that water feature fall wall. But that open joint kind of works with that face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the epoxy material, we're not worried about efflorescence. You know, we're not
None
worried.
at all.
And even beyond that, one of the things that drove me to really be wanting to push epoxy is just the bond strength.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yeah, good high quality thin set materials, cementitious based, have really good bond strength, but still it doesn't even compare to epoxy. And knowing the thermal shock that's going to be on that wall constantly throughout its life, you know, I wanted to make sure that those stones were adhered to the wall, and it's a heavy material, you know, it's a 3/4 inch thick, 6 inch by 12 inch, so it's not, you know, very, very heavy, but it's also not just a thin little tile, you know, there's some weight to each piece.
It was a good few pounds a piece at least.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we had, you know, the ultimate bond strength there.
I think it worked.
It seems to have, and the photos are beautiful. So,
Photos are always beautiful from a distance, but I have.
Well, but
seen
that one's beautiful in live too.
Yeah.
You know, in front of it, it's just as stunning when you see it up close.
Yeah.
So, what do you have in the books? Anything you can talk about? What are you excited about? Where are you going?
Well, we have a couple of things locally in Los Angeles.
Locally, what is?
Yeah, locally.
Okay.
I mean, imagine that.
Do you not only work here?
We travel a little, you know that. So we are talking to a few projects throughout the country.
Okay.
Yeah, but right now, currently, we are actively working on a handful of projects here in Los Angeles.
Okay.
This one we just finished up. We're waiting to fill this pool that we're sitting in right now until more landscaping is finished, and I think the equipment needs to be finished up. And
Yeah, my guys are actually here plumbing up the equipment today and getting this ready.
so I guess we'll be able to get rid of the tent pretty quick and get some water in this.
So, talk about that. You know, we live in Los Angeles. You know, the weather
Yeah.
is good here. Why do you have a tent up?
Sure, it's good compared to other areas in the country, but we have a tent here because, number one, we want to work. Number two, because we had rain in the last couple of months.
Sure.
So, I mean, we
More
got
rain than normal for us.
a lot more rain than normal, but even if it wasn't that extensive amount, we still have rain, and we also had some cooler temperatures. And you know, I want my guys to be comfortable. We also want to keep the insulation materials at a relative temperature. So we had this tented and also heated. We had some propane heaters in here,
Okay.
and it worked. It worked really well. And this is not any. Also, this project is no cementitious materials in here. So
Oh, this is all epoxy.
this is all hybrid type,
Okay.
type material. The reason I bring that up is because I've heard in the past claims or rumors that propane heaters have affected cementitious installation materials in tinted pools.
Oh, really?
I've never seen that, but I have heard it. I don't know if anybody's ever proved it. Maybe
Okay.
they're just looking for a scapegoat for failures. But nevertheless, we did not use cementitious in here. Therefore, I was comfortable using the propane in here.
But we don't always just tent in the wintertime for weather.
No,
you
in
know,
the summer too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we have plenty of projects that want to work throughout the summer. And again, I like to keep my guys comfortable and working. I mean, if they're out in the 110 degree sun, they're not going to be performing too well, and they're not going to be performing long either.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the manufacturers really have specific temperatures that you have to
Well,
keep their materials.
that
And-
was going to be my next thing. I mean, ultimately, you don't want your installation materials, your cements and your thin sets over, I think, like 90 degrees or so. So if you have a nice tent and some good air conditioning, we work on consistently through the summer where some areas get up to 120, 125 degrees. So when we're tented and we have air conditioning, refrigeration units that are just pumping cold air in there, we can keep about an 80, 82 degree atmosphere. And that's ideal for the material and the guys.
So, and even, on some of our jobs where we don't, we're not working in the desert or anything, you're regularly covering everything because it may only be, 75 degrees outside if you're working in Malibu,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
the sun hits it and,
We'll just
and your
cover.
surface temperature.
I just have the guys do that with tarps.
Yeah.
And they can move around as they're working in
I know,
whatever
but
areas.
you say that like it's like it's a standard operating. I mean, it is standard operating for you, but I mean, so many people are like, why would you cover it? I mean, most of the time, your guys are working in a shaded environment. They're not necessarily working in direct sun.
I would say never in direct sun.
Yeah.
I mean, shaded, whether it's like this, a tented over the whole area, or them just moving tarps around. Sometimes, in beautiful weather where it's not too hot, not too cold, but sunny, my guys will just put tarps over the whole pool. And
Or an easy up.
Yeah, or an easy up, and they can move that around. But sometimes they'll put stakes up and tie tarps across just so it stops the sun. You get the full air circulation.
Yep.
And the ambient temperature, which is usually nice and warm in that case, and it just keeps the direct sun off of their material and their surfaces.
Yeah.
I was going to say also keeping the material is critical,
It's
but
critical. Yeah, you can't
but
have it out
also
sitting in
the
the yard.
surface of what you're installing onto.
Right.
So,
And you're
so you
bringing
can't
the
pull a
material.
bag of thin set out of a refrigerated environment and install it onto a pool shell that's been sitting in the 120 degree weather.
Correct. But you're also, conversely, you're also not pulling, your material's not sitting outside the tent. You have your materials brought in, so
Everything
it's
is staged
acclimated.
and protected,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Inside.
If it is sitting outside, yes, we'll bring it in a day or two ahead of time, on a rotation. We'll stay ahead of that curve.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I'm really excited. I'm real excited to get this pool filled up and
Me too. I mean, again, for such a kind of a traditional, old school looking pool, I think it's going to be
Well, and
pretty spectacular.
from where it came from. It's just this is 1,000% better.
But you
than
brought
what
it up to
was.
date hydraulically also.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's not, so visually and technically, this is going to be almost a state-of-the-art pool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got all the latest and greatest equipment in here, and obviously a world-class tile job, and yeah, I'm excited to get water in this in the next couple of weeks.
Cool.
One final thing. Let's just touch on one final thing, because actually I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago and was talking to one of the students about he's done a few all-tile pools and was just finishing one up, and he talked about we're gonna fill it with water next week, and I said, you're still tiling. Talk a little bit about curing protocols and why you need to do that, and where you find that information. Is that just something that you do, Jimmy Reed? We cure our pools 28 days, or what's?
No, actually, that's kind of industry standard regulations. Any cementitious product needs a minimum of, depending on what it is, 21 to 28 day cure time before submersion. So. And that's really easy to find information. Any of the manufacturers that produce installation materials will have somewhere in their guidelines reference to that, to cure times.
And it's real important, no matter what, especially if you're doing glass. You need to go to the manufacturer and you need to, seek out. Almost all of them have installation guidelines. If they don't, you may want to consider if it's a quality enough tile. All of the good quality tile manufacturers have, detailed installation guidelines. They may allow you to use 4 or 5 or 6 different methods or products, but they all have something down in writing of what they recommend.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't follow that and you have a problem, that's kind of on you.
Yeah.
Meaning me, if I don't follow those directions. Yeah. So cure time is important. Yeah. And the cure time for a float may be different than a cure time for the grout, but you really want to know from the last day that you're working and installing that product. From that point, that's when the clock starts ticking.
Yeah, from the time you're done grouting, exactly.
And cementitious material is different, has different cure times and different properties than epoxy-based materials or epoxy polyurethane-based materials. So all the cure times are going to be different for each manufacturer.
Yeah. So you really just gotta. There's no one answer, and so if you're gonna start embarking on and start playing with glass, you really need to educate yourself on membranes and the different options available, different waterproofing protocols, and then understand what the manufacturers are recommending as well. You can't just, there's no blanket statement that.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's right.
So. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Very good. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah. I'm excited to see this. I hadn't seen this pool since you guys finished grouting it, and it really, really turned out beautiful. Nice job again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Ask the Masters podcast, and don't forget to check out our Facebook page each week on Tuesdays for new episodes of the show. I also want to encourage you to stop by the Ask the Masters Facebook page and invite other like-minded individuals to join us there as well. Feel free to jump into the conversations and even post your own questions. We want to create a community which fosters learning and discovery for the betterment of us all. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. Please be sure to subscribe and feel free to share.